Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Coffee and Tea with AARP Connecticut, a conversation in which AARP staff and volunteers talk to Connecticut decision makers about policies and programs that are of interest to older residents. My name is John Erlingheuser, and I'm the Senior Director of Advocacy and Community Outreach at AARP Connecticut. And I'm very pleased to be joined by one of our great AARP Connecticut volunteers, Loren Webber. Thanks for being with us today, Loren, and want to tell the folks a little bit about what you do for AARP and maybe a little bit about yourself before we get into our conversation this morning.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. My name is Loren Webber, and I've been an AARP volunteer for about 2 years now. I wear many hats in the organization, but one of my favorite that I love to participate in is the Fraud Watch Network presentations. And what I do as a facilitator is I go to different venues with other volunteers, and we present programs and workshops at many different places throughout Connecticut. It's great to have people being educated about Fraud Watch, really important topic. So thank you very much for everything that you do in that arena as well. I also like to find other opportunities to advocate for bills and programs that help seniors.
Well, we appreciate you being with us, Loren, and Loren's a representative of one of our many volunteers in Connecticut that do all the work on behalf of our over 550,000 members in Connecticut. So it's also my pleasure today to welcome State Representative Jaime Foster of the 57th District. Representative Foster, thank you for being with us this morning. And can you tell us a little bit about your background, maybe outside of the legislature, and anything you want our viewers to know about you and what towns you represent in the legislature before we dive into bills and things that we're working on?
Sure. Well, hi, everybody. I am Jaime Foster, and I represent Ellington, East Windsor, and Vernon. And I proudly serve on the Banking Committee, where one of my big bills of interest to AARP members is being heard this year. But I'm also the chair of the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, and we have a lot of bills of interest to seniors through that committee. And in my day job outside of the legislature, I have been, for as long as I've been in the legislature, the only research scientist who serves in the Connecticut General Assembly. I have a PhD in nutrition, and my background is in actually food policy. And so prior to my time in the Connecticut legislature, I was always in research roles or evaluation roles in nonprofits where I was helping them run programs for young children who might be facing food insecurity, but for seniors as well. And so I have a lot of background in nutrition. I've used to serve on my Human Services Commission where we're overseeing the meal delivery programs, rides to medical appointments, but also the senior center. And so there's a lot of passion that I have for making sure that we're doing well and good services for our seniors.
Well, we certainly appreciate that. And I'm going to kind of turn it over to Loren for a question.
Thank you. So, Representative, I know that you hold a very important position as the co-chair of the Veteran and Military Affairs Committee. Can you tell us about your role as the co-chair of that committee, and what does that role of that committee chair entail?
Sure. Well, as the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee oversees two primary state agencies and departments. So the military department, which includes the Air and National Guard, and it oversees the VA, the state level VA programs and services. And so we have cognizance over those committees, but then any policies that are meant to help active military families and veterans are of the cognizance of the committee. So oftentimes you see specialty license plates for veterans. Those would come through the committee, but also policies that are significantly more impactful, like property tax exemptions for veterans and military families. This year, I'm very proud to share that we are looking to expand dental care services that are offered through the VA through a voucher program for folks who are eligible for veterans health insurance, that they would be able to get dental services at either Yukon Health Center or a federally qualified healthcare center through their VA benefits.
That's great, and there's some great bills that you're working on. And I know, as Loren mentioned, it's a very important committee. Your role as the chair of that committee, you're working on, as you mentioned, some of them, the really important issues that AARP cares about. And in fact, this year we testified in support of legislation that deals with something they call, has been labeled by some, veterans claims sharks. So can you tell us a little bit about that legislation that's before your committee, and frankly, any other bills that you might not have already mentioned that are being heard before the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee?
Sure. So the Veterans Claim Shark bill is actually very interesting. I was not aware that there is now a for-profit industry that is aiming to help veterans get access to their VA benefits. As many veterans know, that's something you can get for free through a veteran service officer or through the VA outreach officers or your municipal veterans representative, that you can get help enrolling in your VA benefits through those processes. There are now these for-profit companies that claim that they can get you your benefits faster and at a higher rate than you would get through these municipal, through the free available services. Now, unfortunately, there are examples of these companies being predatory. So they'll have you sign up saying that they can get you your benefit faster and better than you would be able to get through your free options. And then when you sign along the dotted line, you are signing that they get 5 months of your benefits before you'll ever see a penny. And what is tragic about all of these processes is that they'll often say, if we give you an increase, then we'll get 5 months of your benefit. And sometimes they make your application staggered. So they'll give you an increase, collect 5 months, say they found another way they can increase and enroll you again another 5 months, and then you'll be caught in this system where it could be years where you're not seeing any of your veterans benefits. You've signed on a contract, and we actually have the attorneys that work with the Connecticut Bar Association and Connecticut Veterans Legal Aid who are helping people sort of disentangle themselves from these contracts. But right now, that is currently against federal law, but there is no federal enforcement mechanism. So the goal for this bill this year is to create a state level enforcement mechanism to enforce that federal law, to give the Department of Consumer Protection and the Attorney General the ability to defend these veterans by codifying that legal standard that exists in the federal level and the state level and allowing Connecticut enforcement.
Yeah, this was a bill that certainly caught our eyes, and we were really pleased that you have it before your committee. And one of Loren's co-volunteers in the Fraud Watch Network, John Coates, testified, and I remember many of those veteran service officers testified in favor of the bill. So we appreciate that. Loren, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Representative Foster. That was really great, and that's such important information for all of the veteran community to know. You also serve on the Banking Committee, and this is a committee we have partnered with you on many issues that are dear to me as an AARP Fraud Watch volunteer, such as the passage of the Senior Financial Protection legislation. Another big area you have prioritized this year in the Banking Committee are bills that AARP have testified in favor of around crypto fraud. Can you please tell me a little bit about your legislation and why that is needed?
Sure. Well, actually, I have a constituent who happens to be an AARP member who is a victim of a cryptocurrency fraud. And that is how this idea came for me. One constituent, one complaint, and then it opened my eyes to a very scary trend that is quickly increasing in our state. And that is of cryptocurrency fraud. So a lot of times this specific type of fraud is something that the police and law enforcement community are calling pig butchering. What is happening is that they are creating a sense of a relationship with the victim. So you might get a phone call. You might think it is someone who you recently reconnected with on social media, or you hadn't had contact with in a while, and they're texting you. And a lot of times they'll encourage you to switch to another texting app like WhatsApp, and then they'll continue to develop a relationship with you. They might even give you money. You might explain that it's your birthday coming up, and they'll send you gifts for your birthday, or Valentine's Day, and they'll send you a gift. Sometimes they're romantic, sometimes they're familial in the way that they're interacting, but they're scams. They're not real. And in the end, this person will tell you either, oh, I made this great investment in cryptocurrency, you should do the same. Or they might say, let's do this together. Why don't you send a portion of your money? Or they might say that, like, why don't you give me your money and I'll make the investment? And people are sending very large sums of money over the internet or at a crypto ATM to someone who is not who they think they are. And so in the example that I have a constituent who gave $134,000 that he had put in investment accounts for his children, thinking that by making this investment, he was going to be able to leave his children a very generous inheritance. He had worked really hard his whole life to accumulate this money that he was going to have available for his children. He withdrew that money thinking he could make it 10 times more through this investment, and he ended up losing everything because it was a scam. But what is made even worse about this is then he owed taxes to the state of Connecticut on his withdrawals. So this bill has a couple of different components. One, I've worked with local law enforcement, particularly out of Troop C, Detective Hogan and Grabowski detectives, and they've been helping me navigate the process of why they can and can't, under different circumstances, appropriately investigate and then prepare cases to be prosecuted so people can get back their money that was lost. So we've been working on creating a system of what's considered asset forfeiture that will allow the law enforcement to offer a notification to the criminal saying, we believe this is fraudulent, we're going to freeze your account, and then take the money back and give it back to the victim. So one, we're hoping to get money back to the victims, but we're also trying to pass a piece of language in this bill that will allow for the state to forgive tax amounts when you have been the victim of a crime or a scam like this. And so we'll see how the timeline of legislative session works this year. Unfortunately, the way this bill came through, it'll require a bunch of referrals. It has to go to judiciary and likely to finance with a tax exemption. And if that's the case, we might be able to get it through judiciary this year and take out the tax forgiveness and run that again separately next year. But it's our hope that we can really move and make progress on really helping our law enforcement and court systems protect victims of these crimes and get them their money back when they've been victims. Unfortunately, we believe that there's about $20 million lost to residents of Connecticut in a year in cryptocurrency scams. And that's estimates based on what we know through reporting, but it's likely much, much more. There is a victim in Connecticut who lost $6 million, and there are victims who lose $5,000 to $10,000. And the amounts of times that people are victims of these crimes, it adds up very quickly.
Yeah, we had when you had the public hearing, AARP, obviously we testified in strong favor of this bill, and we worked very closely with Detective Hogan. And we also had another AARP member who came and testified who, lost basically everything. And this was a highly educated woman who just fell victim to this. And so it just goes to show it doesn't matter who you are, what your economic status are, they figure out a way. And this is really important legislation, and we appreciate you bringing it forward.
What I'll tell you about anyone being likely to be a victim is my constituent who's a victim of this crime. I have actually several that have come out. One of them has a background in finance. And the thing is, finance has changed so much in the last 20 years, but he was still getting his industry magazines, like sort of updating him on industry trends. And cryptocurrency is a booming investment opportunity. And so the person who was trying to victimize him was using all the same terminology he was hearing and understanding from his membership and background being a financial consultant. And so he fell victim to this crime, knowing a lot of times that these things could be a scam, but the person who was trying to scam him said all of the right things. And he actually even went back and screenshotted a lot of the things that the con artist had said, and it was a very sophisticated scam. Even the investment portal, when he had sent the money over for the investment, the portal actually had his name, it had his social security, last 4 digits on it. It looked like an actual portal where his money was growing and making good dividends. He reinvested multiple times because he was watching the money increase, and it was all fake. And so he was really eager to sort of share how this legislation would have made a difference for him. I ended up in the end having 3 constituents who were victims of cryptocurrency scams who have helped share what happened in their situations and what ended up happening. One of the victims actually didn't directly send it electronically. A courier was sent to his house to pick up cash, and then they showed him where his cash had been invested, and they did like a dollar test, and they showed that it worked. There was like an actual app they downloaded on their phone that showed the investment. They're really sophisticated scams, and really it's a criminal element domestically, but the criminals are mostly overseas, and it's a really horrifying circumstances that are happening overseas as well. So it's really just a tragic crime on all levels.
Amazing. So Representative Foster, this is like the year we have the trifecta working on bills with you. I know you're also a member of the Energy and Technology Committee. AARP is no stranger to that committee. We go before it frequently. A lot of people had a sticker shock this past summer when bills went up for a whole host of reasons. Very complicated issue. I know your committee and the leadership of your committee on energy and technology is working their best they can to try to see if we can address that in the legislature this year. So what are some of the ideas that you have? And we know this is going to be there's no instant success, but I know you're trying to do something about it. So why don't you let our viewers know?
So the good news is bipartisanly, everyone wants to see lower electric rates, and we want to do the best that we can to create a system where that's possible. So I will tell you, so I have a PhD in nutrition, totally unrelated to energy. However, energy is the most complicated committee that I have ever served on. And when I got into service on the committee, people often told you to learn quickly how energy policy works, you should talk to the lobbyists. And there are some great white hat lobbyists. AARP has one for sure. But there are certain places where that is a cause for a lot of danger. I think the committee has made a lot of work in the last year, and really bipartisanly in the last year, to try and differentiate the education that we get from our non-biased sources from the undue influence of the energy sector. What's complicated on energy and technology is the materials are so dense, and in a part-time legislature, there is a real possibility of policymakers and regulators alike being captured by the industry, because they come in and they tell you, oh, you don't understand how this works, but let's tell you how it works. Well, I wanted to be resistant to regulatory capture, so I have read now like probably 8 books on energy and technology regulation, including a textbook, which in my whole time throughout my PhD, I never read a textbook cover to cover, but I did to learn energy policy. And so this, when you look at your bill, you see costs that are in 4 buckets. Not all of those buckets can be addressed by the Energy and Technology Committee. Some of them are regulated on the federal level, and some of them are economic patterns that are out of the legislature's control. But there are 2 places where there are actual levers that we can pull, and there's bipartisan bills to address those levers. So the one is the public benefits portion of your bill. I think people would like you to believe that that is only unpaid debt, that some people who didn't pay their bills, you're now paying the balance of it. That is not true. That was a portion of the bill. Unpaid debt across the country was a problem during COVID. It was individuals who didn't pay their bills, but also businesses that were shut down and now don't exist to pay back the bill that they accrued to the utility companies. And so those are going through the collection process. And that will be done in June. However, that was only about 12% of the increase that people saw in the summer. Another huge portion of that, about 77%, was a deal that was negotiated way before my time in the legislature to create a power purchase agreement with Millstone, which is the state's only nuclear plant, but is actually the primary nuclear energy producer in the entire New England region. The state of Connecticut is the only state that subsidizes nuclear, and we've purchased 50% of the energy procured through Millstone. And although we get most of that energy back in Connecticut, the grid's viability, so the balance of the energy in all of New England, is dependent on all of the plants at all times. So we belong to a consortium called ISO New England, and our grid maintains the perfect balance of electrons generated to the electrons drawn down to send energy to your home by ISO New England. And we are the primary nuclear producer for ISO New England right now. And it is exclusively subsidized by Connecticut ratepayers. We passed a bill last year, actually, that meant that all future procurements would include other states in ISO New England. We would never go it alone and subsidize a form of energy by ourselves. In the end, the cost of nuclear sometimes is a hedge. It's sometimes better for Connecticut ratepayers, and sometimes it's worse. In this moment of time, it was so significantly worse that we had that huge increase in what was owed, and that was all collected over a very short window of time. What
Yeah.
is
And
interesting
I'll
about,
just say, Representative
Yeah.
Foster, AARP fought like heck to against that Millstone deal because we said exactly what was going to happen, and it happened. And now everybody's pointing fingers, and I don't forgive the people that are politicizing the public benefits charge, turning people on poor people, when in fact, as you stated, the largest share of that increase was due to the Millstone deal. So I appreciate you mentioning that, and we say it from the rooftops when anybody will listen, because those are the facts.
Yeah, and I appreciate talking about it too, because in addition to it having been the primary source of the problem, it was a problem we foresaw, and we actually passed a bill ahead of the increase that would fix that problem moving forward, that we wouldn't go ahead of it. But that really got lost in the conversation this summer. So there's a bunch of different plans about how we're going to address energy rates moving forward. $200 million of the public benefits charge is a program that is actually a very good program. That's the home energy efficiency program. Millstone was more than that. But the home energy efficiency program is a $200 million annual cost, our home energy solutions that is efficiency. So like if you reduce the amount of energy you need because you have better insulation and more energy efficient light bulbs and appliances, all of those incentives are an annualized cost of about $200 million. For each $50 million that we reduce in costs, you see about $1.40 decrease in your energy bill. So those are huge amounts of money and not a huge amount of savings. So we want to make sure that as we pull these levers, we are controlling the cost, but getting you the most benefit. The average ratepayer is better served by decreasing their own energy usage and by seeing those costs on their bill decrease. And so this year, I have a bill in the GAE committee, and that bill would create accountability to that program. We have long heard that there is sort of this hierarchical benefit in that program where there's the local companies who are running home energy efficiency. Most of them are really good. Some of them might not be as accountable. And then there is this profit scheme that the utility companies get, mostly Eversource, for administering this program. And so we want to create a system where the sort of indirect benefits for administering the program are smaller, so people can get the benefit of home energy efficiency for the lowest sort of overhead cost possible. I actually proposed a bill to send that to the Green Bank to be administered by the state instead of by the utilities companies, who are currently getting performance bonuses for the more light bulbs they distribute, the more feet of insulation that they are getting out. Those kinds of incentive structures are perverse, because what ends up happening is they spend more money and make more money, and there's no accountability for the money being spent in a way that is functional. And so hopefully we can get a little bit more accountability over that program and reduce the costs. And then I have a big bill on something called Grid Enhancing Technologies, GETS, and Advanced Transmission Technologies, ATTs. Those bills, our transmission costs are actually the most volatile part of our bill. And unfortunately, under the current paradigm, FERC approves, the Federal Elections Regulatory Committee, they approve your any investment in the infrastructure, so the wires and the poles. And there's a guaranteed 10% return on investment for the utility companies for any time that they make investments in their transmission. Well, we have a really reliable transmission system in Connecticut, and we actually have no accountability for whether or not when they replaced the wire and pole, it needed to be replaced.
Right.
So this will create more accountability, where they will have to cost out multiple versions, get that approved by FERC and the Connecticut Siting Council and PURA to have more oversight. And I'll say the last thing that I think is the most important one, that gets lost in the conversations all the time. The single most effective protector against rate increases is a strong regulator. We have worked really hard in the last 4 years to give PURA, the Public Utility Regulatory, the authority to exercise a lot of line item and really rigorous control over the utility companies for increasing their rates. We gave them powers. We're going to continue to strengthen their abilities, but the members of that board are what matter most. So if a senior wants to get involved in making sure that their energy rates are as low as possible, the single most effective thing you can do is reach out to your state representatives and state senator and tell them that you want a strong and independent regulator on Pura, that you want people without industry connections on that board and commission, and they either need to have a strong history as a consumer advocate or specific expertise that makes them able to rigorously oversee requests for increase in cost by the utility companies, and that you will not settle for anyone who does not fall into one of those categories, either a strong consumer advocate or someone with technical expertise relevant but without ties to industry. It has to be those two options. There can't be anyone else on that board and commission.
Absolutely. And we appreciate what the legislature has done in terms of creating that strong PURA. And, sometimes people don't realize what the bills would have been like if it had not been for the current configuration of the regulatory authority, because, we've had utilities go in for rate increases and got rate decreases because of the vigorous vetting that this commission has done. So we appreciate that. And we're coming close to time here. So I know Loren has one more wrap-up question, and then we'll close it out.
Thank you so much, Representative Foster. I want to really thank you for being so impactful and so proactive on these great issues. And so AARP volunteers have testified before the General Assembly in the past and are very active in the legislative process. Could you please tell us some of the ways the public can stay informed of the work that the General Assembly is doing and some of the ways they can participate in the process? I know you had mentioned some. We'd love any other suggestions that you have for us, both during the session and when you're not in session.
Yeah, well, I will say, get engaged with your state representative, because we get our ideas by identifying problems. If my constituent hadn't called me and said, I don't know where else to go, the police are telling me there's no way to get my money back, like it's already gone, and we have to figure out ways to protect consumers. If I hadn't gotten that phone call from a constituent saying, please help me understand, I wouldn't have gone into this conversation with my local law enforcement saying, why can't you help? How can I help you better and more effectively help? People call me all the time and say, I had an issue getting my SNAP benefits. My food SNAP benefits were reduced, or I used to be eligible for the senior farmers market program and my senior center didn't have enough benefits. All of the legislation that I have done to protect seniors and help them get better access to food and nutrition, it's all driven by my conversations that I have with members of the community. So when your state rep has office hours or coffee, community coffee and conversation, go and talk to them, tell them what's a struggle for you, and then do your best to sign up for their newsletters. A lot of times state reps will have an email newsletter that goes out pretty regularly. I have a monthly column in the North Central News where I update my constituents, and reach out to your legislator and ask for that level of transparency and accountability, or how that you can engage with them in the systems that they offer. I will tell you, I don't know a single person in this building who does not want to make the lives of seniors more easy, who does not want to help people. And so I think it is a matter of how we do that often we disagree. It's not whether or not we help seniors. We all want to do that. It's an idea of what policy lever is the most effective way for us to help people. And the only way for you to make sure that those policy levers are chosen in a way that helps you is for you to make sure you're engaging with your local rep. And so I would reach out and establish a relationship. Make sure that they know you're paying attention and you want to make sure that they're doing good work.
Well, we appreciate that so much. And, we do love partnering with you on so many different bills, particularly this year and in the past years. And so we look forward to continuing that work with you. And I want to thank Loren Webber, one of our great volunteers, for joining us today. I also just, again, want to thank you, Representative Foster, for all you do. Your constituents are lucky to have you. And we'd like to thank all of you for tuning in to another episode of Coffee and Tea with AARP Connecticut. You can join us again for future episodes. Catch back episodes on demand right here on our Facebook page or on our YouTube page. You can also scan this QR code and become an e-advocate and help us advance policies important to those age 50 plus in Connecticut. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.